Good morning to each of you. Let's pray. Great is thy faithfulness unto us, O God. Morning by morning, new mercies we see. All that we need, thy hands have provided. Great is thy faithfulness unto us. Eternal God, our Father, we do thank you, for great is a nation that remembers their God and their heroes. Shameful is a nation that forget their God and their heroes. We gather today to remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice and to give honor to whom honor is due, those who serve us. We pray your blessings upon our gathering. We invite you into this place. We thank you for this great organization that has brought this to us each and every year. We pray your blessings upon their leaders, their participants, all who has made this possible, every business. Lord, we ask your favor upon them. Even now, God, do that which you do best. Even so, we pray in your name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the President and CEO of the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association, Rich Maladecki.
Please be seated. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CFHLA Patriot Day Breakfast. co-produced with the CFHLA Safety and Security Council. I am honored to welcome you to this patriotic community gathering for the 10th consecutive year. On a similar day like today, 13 short years ago, our country was forever changed following the brutal attacks against our nation and our freedoms on September 11, 2001. As citizens of this great country, collectively, we realized that our daily lives and our safety and security would never again be the same. As a nation, we mourned the lives lost that day, and we feared for our future. Today we honor, once again, the memories of the individuals lost 13 years ago, their families, and the heroes that risked their lives to save them. We have the privilege again today to have on display a steel beam from the World Trade Center, thanks to the Ocoee Fire Department. This piece of iron stands as a symbol that we as a nation will never forget. In addition to remembering September 11, 2001, we are here today to honor local heroes in law enforcement, EMS, fire rescue, and hospitality security. These Central Florida professionals serve as our first responders when emergency strikes. I would like to begin our program by introducing a good friend of everyone in this room, our honorary chairman for this breakfast for 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our Orange County Sheriff, Jerry Demings.
Good morning. It is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be here today on this auspicious occasion as we pay tribute to the more than 3,000 individuals who lost their lives on that tragic day 13 years ago. I'm honored to be here to represent law enforcement. I remember those days. When you think about the tragedy of that day, there were some remarkable things that occurred. One of the things that I remember most, other than the horror of the tragedy, was the fact that for several days, we were all very proud to be Americans. We were indeed one nation under God. I remember those words inscribed on all of our money. I reflected on those words, e pluribus unum, out of many, we became one. I'm reminded of some rare occasions in my lifetime when I saw many of us go through an emotional roller coaster, and we were proud to be Americans. Occasions like the days just after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. I reflect on how I felt in April of 1968 after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I reflect on how I felt as an American in July of 1969 when Apollo 11 went into space and the first astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, walked on the moon. I reflect on being a proud American after the various Olympiads. My prayer is that regardless of the hue of our skin, our gender, our political affiliation, that we will be reminded that we are indeed one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My prayer is that God will continue to bless these great United States of America, that we will all continue to be proud Americans. Look forward to the program today and those individuals who will be honored. I want to say thank you to the Central Florida Hotel Lodging Association for sponsoring this event now for 10 years. Thank you to Rich Maladecki and all of the members for what you're doing to recognize those brave souls who gave their life on that tragic day, September the 11th, 2001. God bless you all.
Thank you, Sheriff. It's a CFHLA tradition that I would like to now recognize our elected officials. And as your name is called, may I invite you to stand, and please remain standing so we may officially acknowledge you collectively at the conclusion of all introductions. From the Ninth Court, State Attorney Jeff Aston. Orange County Commissioner, District 1, Scott Boyd. State Representative, District 45, Randolph Bracey. City of Windermere Mayor, Gary Bruin. State Representative, District 30, Karen Castel-Dento. Orange County Commissioner, District 3, Pete Clark. Orange County Supervisor of Elections, Bill Cowles. Orange County School Board Member, Pamela Gould. Osceola County Sheriff, Bob Hansel. Orange County Comptroller, Martha Haney. State Representative, District 42, Mike LaRosa. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go back one, my apologies. City of Orlando Commissioner, Sam Ings. Mike LaRosa, State Representative, District 42. Rick Singh, Orange County Property Appraiser. Kelly Stargell, State Representative, District 15. State Representative, District 48, Victor Torres Jr., and of course our honorary chairman, Jerry Demings. Ladies and gentlemen, let's recognize these fine community leaders. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you this morning our Master of Ceremonies from WESH TV2 News. Let's welcome their anchor, Jim Payne.
Thank you, Rich. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to the 2014 Patriot Day Breakfast as we honor American heroes and remember the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. I'd like to introduce today's corporate sponsor, Radio One Motorola Solutions. Radio One Motorola Solutions has sponsored this event for 10 consecutive years. And please welcome to the stage David McDonald, the president of Radio One Motorola Solutions.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming to the Patriot Day Breakfast honoring America's heroes. Radio One is very proud to again sponsor this breakfast. Thank you, Rich Maladecki, everyone at Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association, Thea Sargent, and the Patriot Day Breakfast Committee for all your efforts to put this together. Thank you to all our customers. We appreciate the confidence you have in Radio One and Motorola products. I'm sure we all agree that reliable radio communications are very important in the moments that matter. Thank you to all the public safety personnel. We appreciate your excellent service to our community. Thank you.
And just a special thanks to the young people from Howard Middle School for opening up the presentation today. My niece and nephew are both graduates of Howard Middle School, so they're carrying on the fine tradition and doing us all proud, and some of them are still in the room, so just how about a nice round of applause for the young people. Now, we shall pause for a moment of quiet reflection to observe and remember the lives lost on September 11, 2001. Two days after the 9/11 attacks, our keynote speaker was featured in CNN news footage recovering a USMC flag from the Pentagon.
At the Pentagon today, September 13th, 2001, in a rare moment of inspiration and hope, a United States Marine Corps flag was recovered from the fourth floor office, just a few meters from the point of the plane's impact. The flag was recovered by Major Dan Pantaleo, a United States Marine officer and a crew of recovery workers. Amazingly, the flag was completely untouched and unscathed by the destruction and devastation that occurred around it. At the time the flag was recovered, Senator Tom Daschle and the Speaker of the House, Representative Dennis Hastert, were visiting Ground Zero at the Pentagon. Let's listen in as Major Pantaleo briefs the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert.
Mr. Speaker, how are you, sir? I'm Major Dan Pantaleo. Major, we've met one other time before. I was working with Dan Gable with
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Right. Good to see you.
Anyway, sir, it's good to see you again.
Pleasure.
I wanted to bring this Marine Corps flag to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. It stood up there in stubborn defiance to what happened here, and I think it symbolizes all that's great about America. So,
You just brought it in. Thank you. You did a great job.
sir.
Where'd you wrestle?
Small little private school in Michigan, sir, Olivet College.
Oh, I know all that well.
Yes, sir.
Great. Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
for the job you're doing.
Thank you for being here, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. He is an author, a business executive, a retired Marine Corps officer, and a public speaker. His 20-year career in the Marine Corps is punctuated by his service at the Pentagon during the attacks on September 11, 2001. His highly successful book, 4 Days at the Pentagon, details many of the recovery efforts that occurred at the Pentagon and serves as a template for leadership actions in crisis situations. In addition to his service at the Pentagon, Major Pantaleo taught at the U.S. Naval Academy, commanded a detachment of Special Operations Forces, and has been deployed to numerous countries around the world. He is here today to share with us some of his experiences and to commemorate this Patriots Day. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Dan Pantaleo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is an absolute honor to be here, to be able to share the stage with these exceptional young men and women who have performed incredible services for our community. I am very honored to be here. I know Richard likes to run things according to plan, everything like clockwork, but today is September 11th. Today is different. Today it doesn't matter if there's a slight glitch in the presentations for the awards or in my presentation. It doesn't matter if the coffee was too hot or too cold at breakfast. It doesn't matter if the keynote speaker is long-winded and boring. What matters today is that we honorably remember what Patriots Day really means. That's what's important today. And you can do that throughout the day by simply asking this one question. Where were you 13 years ago? Just that one simple question. Where were you 13 years ago? It'll evoke a conversation which gets people thinking about what does Patriot Day really mean. I'm blessed to have the opportunity to travel around the United States and to speak to a variety of audiences and different events. In those presentations, I always weave my 9/11 story into the presentation, whether I'm talking about leadership or I'm talking about paradigm shifts or what have you. I always weave in the 9/11 story because it's part of who I am. It's part of who we are as Americans. But today, I'm not going to weave it into the story or into the presentation because it is the presentation. Again, think back to where you were 13 years ago, what you were doing and what you were experiencing, and how it has shifted our perspective in the United States. Well, I know where I was. I was actually on my way to this building, the Pentagon. I was working in an office which was about 3 miles from the Pentagon in Rosslyn, Virginia. And later that afternoon, I was supposed to attend meetings in the Pentagon, but of course, the events of that day would not only change the events for me, but it would change the course of history. It's interesting because when that day started, I had it all lined out. I had it all planned out. But it was going to change, and it was going to change quickly. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the events of that day, some of the people that played major roles in on that day. You know, there were 265 passengers on those 4 aircraft leaving from the East Coast to the West Coast. 265 passengers and 19 terrorists. And I could talk to you about each one of those passengers almost to tell you a story. But I'm going to pick 2 out today and just talk about them. And the first one I'm going to talk about is this man, Mr. Todd Beamer. Some of you might recognize his photo. You might recognize his story as I start to tell it to you. He was on Flight 93, which was hijacked by the terrorists and then later fought back for control by the passengers. Now, Todd and his fellow passengers, after the plane was hijacked, had the presence of mind to make phone calls from the plane. And they were telling people what was happening and the techniques that the terrorists were using to take over control of the plane. This came in handy later as investigators pieced together how the terrorists were able to do this. On one of his phone calls, he was routed to a Verizon supervisor. Her name was Lisa Jefferson. It was the last phone call Todd would make from the plane. During that phone conversation, Ms. Jefferson explained to Todd that 2 other planes had been hijacked and were crashed into towers in New York City. Upon hearing this, Todd and his fellow passengers knew what they needed to do. They had to fight back for control of that plane. So he told Ms. Jefferson that's exactly what he was going to do. He's going to fight back for control of the plane. And so she said, let's say the Lord's Prayer. And they did. And after the Lord's Prayer, the last audible words on that phone call was a conversation Todd was having with his fellow passengers. And he said these words: guys, I think it's time to move. Are you ready? Let's roll. After what must have been an incredible struggle in the cockpit, the plane finally crashed in a field in Somerset, Pennsylvania. And while all 44 on board were killed, Todd and his fellow passengers succeeded in denying the terrorists the opportunity to use that plane as a weapon, saving countless of lives. When you think about leadership and service and American response, I think about a guy like Todd Beamer and his fellow passengers. There were many victims of 9/11, as you know, almost 3,000 of them. Some of them were in the prime of their life, like Todd, 32 years old, father of 2 small children. But others were very innocent, younger victims. That brings me to the next person I'm going to talk about. One of the youngest victims of 9/11, little Dana Falkenberg. Dana was just getting ready to celebrate her 4th birthday. She was flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, or to California, where she would celebrate her 4th birthday with her mother, father, and her older sister, Zoe. Think about this. How many of you all out there know a 17-year-old? Anybody know a 17-year-old kid, some kid right around 17? Yeah, I've seen a lot of hands up. That's how old Dana would be today had this tragedy not happened. Think about what a 17-year-old is experiencing in their life. They're thinking about what college they're going to go to, getting their driver's license, who are they going to take to homecoming. All of that was robbed by Miss Falk when this tragedy occurred. All of that was taken from the Falkenberg family, and it was taken from them at about 9:43 a.m. 13 years ago when Flight 93 crashed into the Pentagon. This is where my particular part of the story picks up. Now, from my office building in Rosslyn, Virginia, which was about 2.5 miles away, I could see the Pentagon. Before I go too much further, let me ask you a question, and this one is rhetorical, so you can answer. Does anybody know how many people work in the Pentagon? Anybody have an idea? I know some of you may have visited or actually worked in it yourself. Throw out a number. 5,000. That's pretty high. 8,000. Okay, we're getting closer actually. Just over 22,000 people work at the Pentagon. It's literally a city in and of itself. And from my window, I could see a fifth of the building had been destroyed and was on fire. What was going through my head was that we may have potentially just lost 4,000 people like that. We evacuated our office. We were in a high-rise building, and I immediately made my way to the Pentagon because I wanted to be of service and try to assist. On my way there, I linked up with, looks like I fast forwarded. On my way there, I linked up with a few doctors and nurses moving in the same direction. And so as we got together at the Pentagon and we arrived on scene, our intention was to set up a triage area, an organization. But what happened was, by the time we got there, many of the people who were able to get out had gotten out. And we only provided triage for a few remainders. After about 4 or 5 hours later, the volunteers that were around us, there were about 40 of us, decided that we probably would be needed not to do triage, not to do rescue, but perhaps to do recovery, to actually go into the building and bring out the victims. And so we established something called the Initial Response and Recovery Mortuary Team, or the IRRMT. I'm a military guy, so I had to give it an acronym. The IRRMT. So again, 40 people or so, and I had the pleasure of being able to lead this organization. We began the process that evening of gathering the supplies that we would need and making the liaison and coordination with all of the different entities throughout the Pentagon that would be in that area. As you know, it was a federal crime scene, so guess who took over jurisdiction? The FBI. But there were numerous other agencies as well. FEMA was there, Red Cross, plenty of military organizations as well. When we got to the Pentagon, this is what we found was an incredible amount of chaos and confusion, as I'd mentioned earlier. But through that, and through the work with first responders, we were able to carve out a sense of calmness and a sense of control. And then we moved forward with our plans to do recovery operations. We weren't actually able to start the recovery operations until early the next morning because the building was still on fire and it was unsafe to go into it. So early the next morning, we began the operations the second day, and a lot of the volunteers didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And so as they were going into the building early that morning and then coming out, you could see the wide looks on their eyes and that they were experiencing things that they'd never experienced in their life. And throughout that morning, we worked very hard, very long, very difficult situation, emotionally and physically, crawling in and out of the building. But when word came out that President Bush was going to be visiting the compound, I saw an opportunity. Now, I had actually met President Bush about 4 months earlier. I was at the Naval Academy on staff, and he came to give the commencement speech. And I knew, and I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting a president, but it's kind of a neat thing. It really does a lot for your morale and your energy. And so I saw this as an opportunity to maybe, when the president got there at the Pentagon, I tried to get him over to talk to the members of the IRRMT and see if he could deliver a message that might keep the morale up. The problem was this. When I got there, I had just finished crawling out of a hole in the building that is, I'm can I use my pointer if it works? It's not working, but it's just beyond that truck. And you could see just beyond that truck in the background, that's where the building had collapsed, and there was a lot of water that was poured on that section of the building throughout the night. So after crawling out of there, I was covered in mud, soaking wet head to toe, and yet I still wanted to try to get the president's attention to introduce him to the members of the IRMT. So I lined up the members of the IRMT. The president was walking about, and I grabbed one of his aides, told him what we were doing and who I was, and he said, stay right here. Went over, talked to the president, and sure enough, within 10 seconds, the leader of the free world was standing in front of me. So I took off my glove quickly, I shook his hand, and he looked at me up and down, and I knew I was a total mess. And I looked at him, and I reminded him that we had met at the Naval Academy 4 months earlier, and he said, you know, Major, I remember being at the Naval Academy, but I don't quite remember meeting you. And I looked at him up and down, and I looked at his entourage. I looked back at myself, and I said, well, Mr. President, I bet you don't forget this meeting. And sure enough, 7 years later, in his book, Decision Points, on page 142, he talks about meeting members of the IRMT who were covered in mud. That was me. Looks like I was right. Anyway, it was a great opportunity to have him do exactly what I'd hoped he would do. He went down the line, spoke to each member of the IRMT, and it really did serve to lift morale. I think you remember what it was like to hear him speak in New York City the next day. It really did a lot for the country, and so we experienced that one day early at the Pentagon. Now, driving home that evening, it was late at night, about midnight. We were able to shut down operations for a while. We weren't going to pick them up until 6:30 the next morning. So I decided to try to get home, get a shower, and do those types of things. And on my way home, I couldn't help but noticing all of the American flags on displays on homes throughout the Northern Virginia area. And I believe it was like that throughout the entire United States. You know, it was said that there were more flags produced and sold during the week of 9/11 than had been produced and sold the 9 years before combined. Do you remember when you tried to go out and find a flag, you couldn't find one? It's amazing what Americans will do, like the sheriff was saying, how Americans come together, one United States, when we're threatened from an external force or enemy. Well, we continued the operations the next day early in the morning. It was the third day. And by this time, we were able to get into deeper parts of the building, and we were experiencing certain levels of, the volunteers were experiencing certain levels of depression. The adrenaline that we were using to run on for the first 2 days was starting to wane down. Incredibly hot conditions, crawling in and out of the building in essentially gear that's not suitable for doing that with, but it was protective gear. And it was obvious that morale was beginning to wane again. But something would happen that afternoon, and it would give me an opportunity to present another opportunity to maybe boost morale a little bit. What I'm going to do is quickly read to you what happened that afternoon from my book. Just after noon on the 13th, we had a momentary break in our activities. After removing my coveralls, I sat on the bed of the truck with my legs dangling off the edge and watched as Eric Jones and Chris Brayman slumped in exhaustion next to me. We took in the sights of the demolition and construction crews attempting to clear out the debris. Eric cracked open a Gatorade bottle, and we passed it around. Our heads were down, and we were too tired to speak. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, Eric and Chris looked up at the gash in the building and saw an amazing and beautiful sight. Hidden in front of us from most angles, standing tall and proud amongst the total devastation on the 4th floor, was an intact United States Marine Corps flag. And if you look at this slide, and you look good enough, you can see the Marine Corps flag. Red, gold, and looking a little pissed off. Well, we thought it was such an anomaly, all this destruction and devastation around it, and yet that flag was still standing there tall and proud, saying, don't worry, I've got your back. So we moved closer to take photos, and as we did that, one of the construction workers, in fact, the foreman, came up to me and said, Major, you know, that section of the building is scheduled for demolition over the next 3 or 4 days. Everything around that flag, including the flag, is going to end up in the trash heap. After all of the death and all of the destruction that we had seen the previous 2-3 days, we couldn't let that happen. And so we arranged to have the flag removed. It was hoisted up in a cherry picker on the end of a crane, and it's quite a story in and of itself, and it's outlined in the book, 4 Days at the Pentagon. But we were able to deliver the flag to the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, 4-star General, and now the flag sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. The story was covered on the front page of the Washington Post and all those types of things too, but the reason I share this part of the story with you is because I think it's indicative of the way Americans respond to certain events and certain crises. They'll step forward. They'll do the things. They have it in them to step forward and to be of service when they can. Let's look at some numbers from 9/11, very sobering numbers. 2,819 were killed that day. Few more died after September 11th, but that's how many died that day as a result of the attacks. 403 first responders. That is amazing. What do we have in here? Almost 500 or so? Just if you look around and think about that, 403 first responders were killed in those towers in New York City. 20%, this is an amazing fact to me, 20% of all Americans, 1 in 5 of us, knew somebody either killed or injured in the attack. And then that final bullet, 26. 26 days after 9/11 is when the history books and the media reports says that the United States responded. But I beg to differ. Let me ask you, wasn't it part of the American response when those 400 firefighters chose to storm up the ladder well of the towers? Wasn't it part of the American response when Todd Beamer and his fellow passengers fought back for control of that airplane? Wasn't it part of the American response when ordinary Americans across the country, many of them in this room, donated their time, their money, gave blood, or even said a silent prayer? Wasn't that all part of the American response? And that largely goes unnoticed or untalked about in media. Well, we've spent time talking about 9/11, and I know I need to kind of bring this to a close, so I'm going to do this by giving you, not that I need to because I'm in a room of patriots, not that I need to because I know that you're going to remember 9/11, but I'm still going to leave you with this call for action, and it's very simple. The takeaway is this: remember 9/11. Encourage the conversation with the people that you influence in your life, whether they're family members, coworkers, what have you. Ask them, where were they 13 years ago? Let them share their story, share your story with them. It's an important fact that we keep this alive. I'm going to close it with the words of somebody we talked about earlier. I'm going to paraphrase him, actually. The action is now up to us. We can forget about 9/11 if we choose to. And 25 or 30 years from now, there'll be people in positions of power who will forget what 9/11 was because they weren't alive at the time or they don't remember it. But it's up to us to pass that legacy on to the next generation. So, I'm going to leave you with these words. Let's take the action to pass it on. I think it's time to move. You guys ready? Let's roll. Thank you, and God bless the United States, and God bless you. Thank you. Can I stay up there?
Thank you, Major Pantelio, for sharing with us your experiences and perspectives, unique perspectives. Talk about response. Our presence here today is evidence of that continued response. Dan, thanks again for bringing us so close to what happened on 9/11 in 2001. Before we officially recognize the 2014 Patriot Day Breakfast honorees, I would like to recognize all first responders who are in attendance this morning. I'm asking that all EMS, fire rescue, law enforcement, and security personnel, including police and fire chiefs, to please stand as we express our sincere appreciation for your dedication to our community. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Major Dan Pantelio, today's honorary chair, Sheriff Jerry Demings, and Rich Maladecki to the stage for our awards presentations. The CFHLA Patriot Day Awards honor local heroes for going above and beyond the call of duty in their respective areas of service. It is through their efforts and sacrifices that we continue to enjoy the quality of life, knowing that highly skilled emergency responders are just a phone call away. Today, we not only honor the skill of these first responders, but also their dedication to their careers in public service. We will share with you the heroic encounters that earned the award for each of our honorees. We'll begin with the Life-Saving Award in Law Enforcement. Today, we honor Deputy First Class Jason Gaynor from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. On May 21st, 2014, Deputy First Class Gaynor was on patrol when he arrived on the scene of a traffic accident which had just occurred. The vehicle involved in the accident was in the middle of the road and smoking heavily. Upon further inspection, Deputy Gaynor realized that the vehicle contained one male occupant and maneuvered his vehicle to block traffic and render aid. The driver was distressed, disoriented, and in a state of shock. During the initial attempt to rescue the victim, it was discovered that the driver's door was jammed shut, entrapping the victim. A bystander advised Deputy Gaynor of a fire in the vehicle's engine compartment. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation and without concern for his own safety, Deputy Gaynor pulled repeatedly on the vehicle door until it eventually opened seconds before the vehicle became engulfed in flames. He literally ripped the door off the vehicle. Deputy Gaynor stayed with the victim until Orange County Fire Rescue arrived. The victim survived and is recovering. Had Deputy First Class Gaynor not acted quickly, the driver would have likely perished in this accident. Deputy First Class Jason Gaynor, we honor you today for your service and dedication in going above and beyond to save those in need. Our second award is for Fire Rescue Life Saving. This award is being presented to firefighter paramedic Carlos Tavares and firefighter paramedic Joshua Stewart of the Orlando Fire Department. Tavares and Stewart are 15 and 7-year veterans of the Orlando Fire Department, respectively. On January 26, 2014, Orlando Fire Department units arrived on the scene of a single vehicle crash. The vehicle quickly escalated into a fully involved fire. While the engine worked to deploy a hose line, firefighter paramedics Tavares and Stewart recognized that the driver was unconscious and trapped, with fire rapidly engulfing the vehicle. They gained access to the front seat. Tavares worked to free the driver, while Stewart used his body to protect the driver from flames. The driver was rescued to safety moments before the seat he had occupied was actually burned up by the fire. These actions took place without the protection of water on the fire. The selfless actions of firefighter paramedics Tavares and Stewart, without a question, saved the life of that individual that day. Thank you, firefighter paramedic Carlos Tavares and firefighter paramedic Joshua Stewart, for your dedication and service. You are heroes and an inspiration to us all. This year's honorees for the Life-Saving Award in Emergency Medical Services, EMS, are from the St. Cloud Fire Rescue, Lieutenant Michael Palmer, firefighter-paramedic Alicia Taylor, firefighter EMT Justin Hall, firefighter-paramedic Robert Wise, and firefighter EMT Ron Snavely. On June 6th of 2014, E32 and Rescue 32 responded to a call of a child choking. Upon arrival, the crew was met by a family member who was holding a child who was gray in color. A grape had lodged in the child's airway, preventing normal breathing. The child was rapidly transported to St. Cloud Memorial Hospital. Suctioning and back blows were unsuccessful in dislodging that grape, so in order to maintain a viable airway, crews had to invert the patient by the legs to ensure that the airway remained partially open. Both ER staff and the St. Cloud Fire Rescue crews continued to work on the patient until the grape was dislodged. If it not for the quick thinking and innovative approach to maintain the patient's airway, this patient may not have survived. Thank you, Lieutenant Michael Palmer, firefighter-paramedic Alicia Taylor, firefighter EMT Justin Hall, firefighter-paramedic Robert Wise, and firefighter EMT Ron Snavely for your dedication and service. You are heroes and an inspiration to us all. It's always the story behind the story that's the most remarkable thing, really. That's some great work. Our next award honors Officer Edwin Radcliffe of the Mall at Millennia Security Department for life-saving in hospitality security. On January 17th, 2014, while on routine patrol, Officer Radcliffe observed a white Econoline van lying on its side in a retention pond next to the roadway at the Mall at Millennia. Officer Radcliffe immediately contacted dispatch for the Orlando Fire Department to respond. He then entered the alligator-inhabited waters to begin removing the 16 occupants. The 16 were mostly teenagers and were all safely evacuated from the partially submerged vehicle. Without the quick actions of Officer Radcliffe and his willingness to risk personal safety, the outcome of this accident could have been tragically different. Thank you, Officer Edwin Radcliffe, for your dedication to service. You are a hero and an inspiration to us all. This year's first honoree for heroism in law enforcement is Officer Jason Hajek from the Orlando Police Department. While conducting patrol on the west side of Orlando, Officer Hajek attempted to conduct a traffic stop shortly after 2:30 a.m. I always tell my boys, nothing good happens after midnight. This routine traffic stop quickly turned more serious when the vehicle fled at high speed. Officer Hajek pursued the vehicle onto a nearby street where he found it parked in front of a house. The driver and passenger had taken off running. After engaging in a short foot pursuit, the driver pulled a gun and shot Officer Hajek twice. In the midst of the gunfire, Officer Hajek managed to return fire, injure the suspect, and broadcast a call for assistance. Within minutes, assistance arrived and first aid was provided to Officer Hajek. His lower abdomen was pierced by one of the bullets. The suspect was tracked to a nearby house where he was barricaded with a 7-year-old child. After several hours, the suspect was removed from the home, arrested, and charged with attempted murder of a law enforcement officer with a firearm and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Officer Hajek's actions demonstrated courage and the presence of mind in the face of imminent danger. He has since recovered from his injuries and is now back on patrol. Regrettably, easy for me to say, yes, I talk for a living, thank you. Officer Hajek is not able to join us today as he is out of the country, and he will be honored at a future private function. How about a nice round of applause for Officer Hajek? Corporal Eduardo Bernal from the Orlando Police Department is today's second honoree for heroism in law enforcement. Corporal Bernal was supervising a squad on the west side of the city of Orlando in the early morning hours of March 22, 2014, when a call for help was received from a neighboring jurisdiction at 3:45 in the morning. Officer Robert German had been shot in the nearby city of Windermere. Bernal was the first Orlando Police Department member to arrive on the scene and discovered several officers from different agencies were taking cover behind their respective vehicles. Officer German was lying on the street beside his patrol vehicle. Moments before Corporal Bernal's arrival, shots had been fired at the other officers. The area was poorly lit and provided little visibility. The location of the suspects was not known, and the area was not secured. Corporal Bernal realized it was critical to get to Officer German. He organized a team of officers and planned an officer rescue. As the team started to move, Orlando Police Department K-9 Officer Brian Fisher arrived on the scene and used his patrol vehicle as the cover vehicle to provide security for the rescue team. Risking his personal safety, Corporal Bernal moved toward Officer German, lifted him off the ground, and backed him into the rear seat of the Windermere patrol vehicle with Officer German lying against his chest. Officer German had a gunshot wound to the head, but he still had a pulse. An officer of the rescue team jumped into the driver's seat and drove the vehicle away from the scene, where Orange County Fire Rescue took over first aid and transported Officer German to the hospital. Bernal immediately turned his attention back to the scene, organizing officers to secure the scene and locate the suspects. He directed 4 K-9 officers to deploy their dogs, who then found the suspect and his girlfriend, both deceased, approximately 100 yards away from where Officer German was shot. Tragically, Officer German died from his injuries. Corporal Bernal showed exceptional adaptability and sound decision-making at the scene. He demonstrated leadership and presence of mind while risking his personal safety in an attempt to rescue Officer German. Corporal Eduardo Bernal, we honor you today for your courage and determination during this dangerous situation. This year's honorees for heroism in fire rescue are from the Seminole County Fire Department: Lieutenant Terry Myers, Lieutenant Paramedic Stephen Molnar, Firefighter Paramedic Douglas Schenk, Lieutenant Paramedic Joel Herrera, Firefighter Kevin Nowak, and Firefighter Tyler Gaddy. Seminole County Fire Department responded to a structure fire with multiple calls, flames showing, and possibly 3 people still inside. Upon arrival, the crews were presented with an active fire in the rear of the house and multiple bystanders indicating there were people still inside. Coordination among the crews allowed for quick entry until all victims could be located, untangled from debris, and removed from the structure. The crews performed flawlessly and utilized special equipment for locating the occupants and for smoke removal in order to provide the highest chance of survival for all of the victims. 3 victims were located in the kitchen and removed from the home. One of the victims was entangled in a bicycle and household items within the kitchen that required additional efforts to free them for removal. All of the patients were transported to the area trauma center for burns and smoke inhalation. Now, regrettably, the victims were burned extensively and eventually succumbed to their burn injuries within weeks of the incident. The Seminole County Fire Department firefighters placed themselves in harm's way and put their lives at risk to perform a primary responsibility. Thank you, Lieutenant Terry Myers, Lieutenant Paramedic Stephen Molnar, Firefighter Paramedic Douglas Schenk, Lieutenant Paramedic Joel Herrera, Firefighter Kevin Nowak, Firefighter Tyler Gaddy, for your dedication and your service. You are heroes and an inspiration to us all. This year's Lifetime Achievement Award is being presented to retired Battalion Chief Michael Howell of Orange County Fire Rescue. Battalion Chief Howell began his career at the young age of 17 while attending Oak Ridge High School. He was assigned to the Pine Castle Fire Department as a fire explorer sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America. He was hired as a full-time firefighter in 1976 and mastered multiple facets of the strenuous job. Battalion Chief Howell learned many valuable lessons and skills while working multiple alarm fires, including the Paper Pack Fire in Taft, the National Mattress Factory Fire, and others, propelling him into a leadership role. Howell was promoted to engineer in August of 1982 and company officer in 1985. He used lessons learned to mentor firefighters at all levels. Throughout his career, Battalion Chief Howell adopted leadership principles that invoked other firefighters to lead by example, integrity, and help others in their moment of need while always honoring the fire profession. Promoted to the rank of Battalion Chief in 2001 after serving as a company officer for 16 years, Howell had a desire to mentor a greater number of firefighters. His passion for teaching led him to be an instructor at the Orange County Fire Rescue Department Command School, where he teaches others the principles of managing a fire station on a daily basis, control of fire and medical incidents, and to utilize the National Incident Command System. Battalion Chief Howell has had the privilege of witnessing babies draw their first breath and attempting to save countless others as they fight for their last one. Howell is the epitome of leadership and is recognized as a cornerstone of Orange County Fire Rescue. With 38 years of faithful service, he has selflessly given the best years of his life to serving the citizens of Orange County and providing support to his fellow firefighters. We thank you, Battalion Chief Michael Howell, and we honor you with the Lifetime Achievement Award for being a role model. As we begin to close today's program, we'd like to take a moment to thank Thea Sargent of Disney Destinations and chairperson of the Patriot Day Committee. We also thank the members of the Planning Committee for their efforts. Without their dedication and support, this event would not be possible. May I ask all committee members to stand and be recognized. Now let us thank Kathy Canning, Lex Veach, Debbie Vanek, and the staff here at the Orange County Convention Center for hosting our gathering today. Next, we'd like to thank Doug Connor, Terry Ross, and the staff of Center Plate for the outstanding breakfast and wonderful service. We would also like to thank the following companies for their in-kind contributions: DoubleTree by Hilton Orlando at SeaWorld, Greenery Productions, Minuteman Press Sand Lake, Orlando Mattress Company, PSAV Presentation Services, and today's official photographer, Britt Runyon Studios. Also like to thank Orange TV for broadcasting today's CFHLA Patriot Day Breakfast. For your information, Orange TV will be broadcasting a compilation of past year's keynote presentations, and we'll be broadcasting today's event tonight again at 7 o'clock and then periodically during the month of September. And lastly, please join us in thanking our corporate sponsor, Radio 1 Motorola Solutions, for their continued support of this event. Thank you all again for having me. At this time, I'd like to bring Rich Maladecki back up to start our closing ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, to add professionalism to this event, each year we bring one of our local newscasters, and I think Jim Payne did us well today. Let's recognize and thank Jim. Jim, thank you very much. Nicely done, Jim. Nicely done. For your information, today's keynote speaker will be available at the conclusion of our breakfast for a book signing in this book signing area. And all proceeds from the book benefit the Wounded Warrior Regiment Project. Ladies and gentlemen, lastly on this day, September 11th, let us not forget those individuals who were lost or who were injured in the tragic events of 2001. Thank you.